Let's go to Myanmar now, where there are troubling new reports that dozens of civilians from the Muslim Rohingya minority have been killed in an alleged attack by separatist rebels. It reportedly happened in the western Rakhine state in the past week. According to witnesses cited by the Associated Press and Reuters news agencies, at least 150 people died after being deliberately targeted while trying to flee into neighbouring Bangladesh. The alleged attack near the town of Maungdaw is being blamed on the Arakan Army, which has been fighting Myanmar's military in the area. The rebel group has denied responsibility for the reported killings. Now, the aid group Doctors Without Borders has confirmed that its staff in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh have treated almost 40 Rohingya people with mortar and gunshot wounds. In a statement, it has said escalating numbers of Rohingya people with violence-related injuries have crossed the border into Bangladesh over the past week, re-indicating the worsening humanitarian crisis in Myanmar's Rakhine state. Joining me now from Bangkok is Poppy McPherson, Special Southeast Asia correspondent for the Reuters news agency. She's been reporting on this story. Welcome to TW, Poppy. This apparent attack happened on Monday, but details are only just emerging, partly thanks to your reporting. What can you tell us about what's going on in Rakhine State?
Yes, so there's been fighting in Rakhine State for a number of months between the military, which rules the country, which seized power in 2021, and some rebel group called the Arakan Army, which is a very powerful rebel group that is comprised mostly of members of the Buddhist community. Myanmar's a Buddhist country, but Rakhine State contains also a number of Rohingya Muslims. So they're kind of trapped in the middle of this fighting between the Arakan Army and the military troops. And that fighting has really escalated in the past week as the Arakan Army has made significant gains in the fight against the military.
And now we know that Sorry, go on.
We've seen these heinous attacks, that have affected the civilian population, the Rohingya families, families killed, including children, very young children and women.
And I wanted to ask you about the verification process for those attacks. We know that travel to the area is difficult and information is really limited. So how do you go about verifying what information you're hearing?
Yes, it's very difficult. As you mentioned, the communication is sporadic. There have been communication issues on both sides of the border. So Bangladesh obviously is undergoing huge upheaval at the moment, and there have been communication shutdowns. And in Myanmar also there's sporadic access to people don't have that much. In Maungdaw, in Rakhine State, the access has been difficult too. So we're really seeking to speak to people who have fled the fighting and made it into Bangladesh. We've been reporting on the community for a long time, myself and colleagues, and so we are able to speak to sources within the community and we were able to find some survivors of the recent attacks. And then the other side of that is that a lot of footage has surfaced on social media appearing to show the attack or the aftermath. And so we did some work verifying that footage, matching it against file footage and satellite images to confirm the location and confirm details of that video with survivors too.
So does this attack appear to be a targeted campaign against the Muslim Rohingya minority, or have they been caught in the crossfire?
It's very hard to say whether it's targeted or not. The Arakan Army denies the attack. The military also denies responsibility for the attack. It's very hard to establish the identity of the perpetrator in this case. 3 of the survivors that we spoke to said that they believed the Arakan Army to be responsible, but the Arakan Army denies this. So it's complicated to really to get to the bottom of what happened. But as you said, we don't have people on the ground there, and it's a very fast-moving situation. So we have to work hard to try to verify. But as to whether it's targeted or not, certainly Rohingya are being driven out of Myanmar again. So we're seeing population moving towards the Bangladesh border. We reported a couple of weeks ago on an attack by the Arakan Army on Buthadong town, which is a large Rohingya settlement. And in that case, many survivors told us the Arakan Army was responsible for that. So there's a pattern of attacks on the Rohingya population.
Poppy McPherson, Special Southeast Asia correspondent for the Reuters news agency. Thank you so much for your reporting.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'd like to bring in Kyle Matthews, Executive Director of the Montréal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies at Concordia University. Thank you so much for joining us. Based on what we know of this attack, why do you think that we have seen the Rohingya caught up in it? Was it directly targeted at them?
Well, the Rohingya, the 600,000 who are remaining in Myanmar have faced persecution, lack of access to school. They're still a mistreated minority. What we're seeing, though, is that this is a new phase of Myanmar's conflict. Armed groups have taken up and are working together to fight the Myanmar military junta. And we have seen the Rohingya trying to flee and supposedly, allegedly targeted by drones and artillery by the Arakan Army. So that's what we know so far. But there really are a minority that the world has forgotten about and still face just a terrible situation in Myanmar itself.
Yeah, as you mentioned, there is a long history of persecution of the Rohingya in Myanmar. Our audience will remember hundreds of thousands of people fled the country back in 2017 after a military-led crackdown then. Can you go into a little more detail about why we are now seeing additional people trying to leave?
Well, for the case of the Rohingya, they remain kind of forcibly contained in certain areas. They're not allowed to travel through the country. They don't have access to education, to food. So people are leaving because they're absolutely desperate. That's the truth. The second thing is the Arakan Army that's been working with other rebel groups to fight the military junta have basically taken over most of Rakhine state. And so there is a vicious fight between the Arakan Army and the military junta right now, and the Rohingya are caught stuck in between it. They cannot leave and they cannot flee.
So would it be possible that this is just a case of them being caught in the middle between this fighting rather than being the direct target of an attack like this?
Well, that's what some are saying. However, if they were trying to flee to Bangladesh as refugees and they were targeted by drones and artillery, that signifies that they're being targeted for a reason. There are other reports that there are Rohingya in Bangladesh refugees that are being forced at gunpoint to return and being conscripted into militia groups or even within the Myanmar military itself. So there's a lot of there's a fog of war here. We don't know everything that's going on, but there are reports being detained, detailed. Doctors Without Borders have helped some of the people targeted by this violence. And it doesn't seem like it's just it's a one-off. It seems like there's a message here to either target them or force them to stay because they want to be conscripted to fight for rebel groups or in the army itself.
Okay, more information coming in, of course, on this story, but that is very insightful already. Can you talk us through the current situation in Myanmar? As you've said, we've seen diverse groups across the country fighting against the military. How effective have they been in challenging the regime?
They've been phenomenally effective. Since the military overthrew the democracy in 2021, led by Aung San Suu Kyi, we've seen different rebel groups not just fight back, but begin planning together. We've seen civilians from the capital, from larger cities, go into these rebel-held areas and also join the fight. And now we have this Three Brotherhood Alliance, these groups that have fought, they're taking back territory, and people are questioning whether the military junta is going to survive this civil war. They just lost a major military base last week. Things are not going well for the military government, and civilians are suffering because of it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on DW News with your insights. That is Kyle Matthews, Executive Director of the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies at Concordia University.
Thank you.